My point is white history is consistently misrepresented. Columbus was a dipshit. He was a fucking idiot, and he didn't really do anything of significance.
Okay, so at this point, a lot of us know that by now, but I feel like what you're saying is they're not teaching that.
They're not teaching that.
Right,
That's what I'm fucking saying. Like, white history is taught wrong. White History Month is about teaching white history accurately, and it's mostly terrible. And if we want to talk about white accomplishments, things that white people have done that are good, we have to talk about individual accomplishments in spite of the fact that white people, on average, are systemically racist.
I got you. So,
ranting.
No. I hear what you're saying. So, you're saying white history is literally mostly bad. And if you want to talk about the accomplishments of what a white person did, it should be about the individual and not as a whole.
Yes, because it's in spite of that. It's literally in defiance of the system. And even if it is in accordance with the racist practices of white people as a race on average, that means that actual accomplishment is less significant than you've been taught it is. White privilege. If somebody's more privileged than another person, their accomplishments in terms of proportion are less impressive, less significant.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm emotional about this.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, this all makes sense.
Alright, what up, you guys? I'm Bryson Smith.
And I'm Javin. And this is Who Cares?
There you go. Alright, so
today, I just want to... go
First off, if you're new to the channel, thank you for stopping by. Here on this channel, we talk about not new controversies, but controversial topics and lesser known topics and things that don't really get portrayed in media.
Yeah.
That's where we kind of come into play. So thank you for stopping by. We appreciate you.
Yeah,
and I'll let my co-host here introduce the topic.
So I just want to clarify, we are not experts on anything.
Never that.
We are very young, and we have no experience when it comes to most things, but we still have opinions, and we deserve to express our opinions.
Definitely.
And when we express our opinions, it's going to be on things we have no idea what we're talking about. So today, we're going to talk about White History Month.
We kind of have an idea on this, though. We know where we're going with this. Yeah, like you've seen by now, White History Month.
So we're going to take the extremely controversial approach on both sides that White History Month should be a thing. I think we should 100% celebrate White History Month.
Right.
100%. I think we should.
But listen to where we're going with this.
Don't click away. I know what you're thinking.
Right.
So July. I think July is the perfect White History Month. And here's what I mean by White History Month.
Explain to them what it should be about, though, when you talk about White History Month.
So Black History Month is talking about the race. Black people as a race have a history. And we talk about the history in terms of a systemic sense and an individualistic sense. We talk about the individual accomplishments of black people, as well as the systemic oppression and overcoming that oppression that the black race has accomplished.
Okay.
When we talk about white history, what does white history represent? I think we should definitely talk about the individual accomplishments that white people have, and we do every single day. Every single day. But what we don't talk about as often is the systemic things that white people have put into place in our history. And I don't think enough people know about that.
Wait, so essentially what you're saying is White History Month should be about the negative things that they've done to people, right?
I'm talking about the actual things they've done to people, which are routinely negative.
Right.
Consistently
I want
negative.
to put in perspective what you're saying here, though. I want to say that there's only one race, the human race. There's only the human race.
Yeah, and
there's different ethnicities and whatnot, but there's only one race, the human race. But what you're saying here is when you're talking about white people, Europeans, when we talk about White History Month, you're saying you want to talk about the negative things that they've done throughout history.
I want to talk about the positive things they've done and the negative things. I want to lay it out as it happened.
But what are you saying White History Month should be about? Because if you talk about positive things, I could argue, and I think a lot of people argue that they're already talking about the positive things that white people done like 365 days out of the year.
Here's a fun fact about white history in case you didn't know, which is why I think you need a White History Month. So there's individual accomplishments. And every day is, hey, we want to talk about white people's individual accomplishments. Every day is that day. So congrats.
Yeah, that's already.
We got it.
You could say White History Month is every day of the month.
But that's not what White History Month should be about. In the same way that Black History Month shouldn't be about the individual accomplishments of Black people. It should be a part of it, and it is a part of it, but we should also talk about the systemic things they've
Black
had to
History
deal with.
Month should be really like, Black History Month should just be American history.
Honestly.
Like, that should just be something you hear about every single day.
And White History Month should talk about the things that white people have systemically put into place. And guess what they are?
So essentially the negative things.
Routinely negative. Almost universally negative. Almost all the time, white people have put in negative systems. India. We colonized India. We colonized several places and systemically oppressed them, stole their spices, stole their culture, eliminated their culture. Andrew Jackson eliminated the Native Americans in this country, and we still
took over the whole country. So
that has nothing to do with the individual accomplishments of the white people. I'm saying that while Andrew Jackson specifically did that thing, that's not because Andrew Jackson alone was capable of doing that. That's because of the systems that white people put into place that allowed that to happen and continue to allow that to happen. White History Month.
I pose a question.
Go for it.
People ask, who is this Andrew Jackson individual?
Andrew Jackson is the president of the United States of America. He's on the $20 bill, I believe.
Okay.
And he was a genocidal maniac, and he did a lot of cool things. Like he dueled a lot of people.
Okay.
He did a lot of cool stuff with that, where he shot people and killed them, and that was awesome. People love Andrew Jackson for that. He swore a lot. His parrot.
So he I guess he was a character.
He was a character.
Okay. He
also committed mass genocide. Hitler committed mass genocide.
A character as well.
A character. Stalin. Here's what I'm saying. White people individualistically have done amazing things. Individuals are capable of amazing things. Whether you're Black, white, Latino, Asian, doesn't really matter what ethnicity or race you're a part of. Individuals are capable of amazing things.
I agree with that.
White people as a race have done...
As a whole.
Have progressed society in terms of technology. I'm not going to deny that, but we've also ingratiated systemic oppression. That's not cool. That's not something I can look back to and be proud of. That's not something I can look back and say, hey, as a society, how'd you white people do? I can't look back at that and say, wow, I'm sure glad none of you committed war crimes or crimes against humanity or committed genocide or enslaved an entire group of people. I literally can't look back at almost any point in human history and say, white people have done this amazing thing. We've done terrible things almost routinely. And so I want a White History Month to highlight
the negativities.
All the things, positive or negative. And I want to illustrate how...
I would just say the negatives, because I feel like outside of White History Month, it's already the positives.
I guess what I want to say is, in context, the positives pale in comparison to the negative.
Which is why I would just say it should just be the negatives, because we already get the positives outside of this White History Month.
We get the positives, but do we ever get that in context? Like, for example, Thomas Edison, he's provided a lot of positives.
Electricity,
to the world.
right? Like, we know about that.
Yeah, but he didn't invent...
We know about...
he didn't invent electricity.
Columbus, even though he wasn't the first. Or
Columbus is a terrible person. We
know all about the white people who've done great things.
But here's what I'm saying.
Every day of the year.
We don't actually know about the white people who've done great things.
Well, that's what they're teaching us, though.
Yeah, and that's what I want to challenge. And so, I think July... Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. We're kind of like... what I want to say is a lot of white people have done amazing things, but what the amazing things they have done are because they defied the systemic oppression of what white people put into place. In the same way that that Black people, as a race, overcame the systemic oppression they were subjected to. And that's what makes Black people, in terms of history, a formidable force and an interesting part of history that we should talk about. Black History Month should be a thing. We should talk about that more. And that's what Black History Month is about. But if we talk about White History Month shouldn't be about the accomplishments that that white people have done in spite of how terrible they are. It should talk about the whole shebang. It should talk about the entire caboodle. And if you don't like what you see, then you don't like white people's history, because that's it.
Listen, the thing is, what we're saying, okay, the whole White History Month.
We're 8 minutes
being about the negative things that white people have done.
9 minutes in, yeah.
You can say I'm pessimistic or not, but I don't ever see this being taught in school because America doesn't like confrontation.
White people
on themselves. Like America can't look themselves in the mirror. They can't.
We have a hard time with it.
America cannot look themselves in the mirror and be like, yo, we're fucked up. America can't do that. They don't like talking about, listen, it's hard to talk to a white person about slavery because it's uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. It is
really
uncomfortable.
Is. And I get it, but
I'm uncomfortable
when
with
you
it.
want to grow, you have to be uncomfortable with conversations like that.
Yeah, for example, I didn't enslave anybody. And none of my parents enslaved anybody, and my grandparents didn't enslave anybody. In fact,
how do you know? I'm just maybe your great grandparent. I mean, listen, my last name is Smith. My last name is my name is Bryson Smith. So at some point, I know I'm a part of like a slave master's. That's a white man's last name, Smith. So I know there was slaves in my bloodline, in my heritage.
And he's done more research than that. Like
I've actually got my DNA tested and whatnot. Like I know that's in my bloodline. That's in my blood type.
Yeah, not in mine. Fun fact, I don't know if you could tell, but I was never, in my family history, I never was enslaved. And that, fun fact.
Right.
I don't know if you could tell, but, and that's kind of my point. If I talk about white people as a heritage, I have none. Not in the sense that I don't have a history, but in the sense that I truly can't be proud of any aspect of what white people have done systemically. And you could say it's chance, right? White people on average have on chance done terrible things, but there are also white groups of people that have done great things.
Right.
Except for the fact that they really, on average, haven't.
Right, as well.
And that's what's devastating. Bryson has a heritage where he's seen the things his family and those who he's related to have overcome trial and tribulation.
Right.
I don't.
Right.
I've never been in a disenfranchised situation. And even then, my parents are deaf. They were in a disenfranchised situation. I was raised in a poor community, but it has nothing to do with my race. That has to do with a different aspect of my identity. And my point is, white people systemically across the world, I can't emphasize enough how much devastation white people, and it's literally just their race. I'm not talking about every white person. I'm talking about a large amount of white people, the devastation and havoc they've wreaked across the entire world is staggering. And that's what I want to show in White History Month in July, where, yes, I do want to celebrate the fact that the American Revolution happened. I do think it's courageous what our forefathers did. I think Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, even John Madison, I think they did some genuinely amazing things, and they were white, and I think that's something to praise their actions. But I also want to acknowledge that they were slave owners, and they weren't even good slave owners. They were wretched, terrible slave owners who hurt people because they thought it was something they got to do.
See, when I hear all this, I always think of like, this is basically America looking at itself in the mirror, and I know that they won't do that. They're not going to have a White History Month talking about all the bad things that they've done throughout history.
More than
I know that they're not going to teach that.
More than that, saying, hey, look at this awesome thing this white guy did. Fun fact, this white guy, because he did this good thing, also got to do 1,000 terrible things. This is why I don't want to limit it to, hey, look at all the sins of white people, because I don't think that actually accurately describes White History Month. White History Month also talks about the accomplishments of white people.
But see, when you say that, I feel like that would, because we already hear about the accomplishments from white people every other day, like outside of this White History Month.
But the accomplishments of white people are never put into context. For example, George Washington was an extremely successful man. George Washington was remarkably rich. You know, partially because of who he married, his wife, who had a history of slavery that got her into extreme wealth. And because of that wealth and name and reputation, he got to lead the Revolutionary War and succeed at it. He was an excellent general. He was a remarkable man.
Was he?
But because of slaves. He was rich because of slaves. His accomplishments are dependent on his sinful behavior.
Why do we celebrate people like him?
Because we can't help it. History is made by great people, not good people. Martin Luther King wasn't necessarily a good man. I don't want to go into the sins of the black community, but Martin Luther Jr. cheated on his wife.
Okay, I feel like
unrelated, right?
No, that's very unrelated. But I feel like, well, I've never heard that, and it may or may not be true, but
it's
I feel
probably
like
true. Sorry, I don't.
I mean, like, to compare that to someone who's had slaves is like,
and that's my point.
What do you think is worse, cheating on your wife or having slaves?
And that's exactly my point. The reason I want to talk about the accomplishments of white people isn't to glorify their accomplishments, but to exactly measure their accomplishments in the exact context they exist in. How do you think they came across those accomplishments? Because for a large portion of their existence, they're white. Jesus Christ. It's not because they overcame tribulation in the same way that an entire group of people had to. It's because they were fucking white. I'm not saying they didn't have trials. I'm not saying they didn't have to go through shit. I'm saying that because of the fact that they're white, their accomplishments are that much more systemically oppressive.
This would be a perfect example of the saying, white privilege.
That's what I mean.
It's all white privilege.
Columbus was white.
White privilege.
That's why he's remembered. His accomplishments aren't less because of that, but they are different in the context of history. History talks about great people. Columbus was a great man. He was also a terrible person. He was a monstrous idiot.
A great man, but a terrible person.
And that's who we glorify.
Me the wrong way. Was he really a great man?
He did great things.
What makes him a great man?
Literally?
No, I really want to know what makes Columbus a great man. Because
from
my perspective, like, I'm not ever thinking Columbus was a great man when I go about my day. Like, I'm just not like. There's a lot of people that I think of, like, I would say Obama's a great man.
Obama's a pretty cool guy.
Like, there's people in my mind when I think of great men that I would look up to.
Abraham Lincoln was a great man.
I wouldn't even think of him as a great man.
You don't think so?
Like, yeah, he did the whole, like, he ended slavery or whatever, but I know he also had slaves.
Abraham Lincoln? I don't think he had slaves.
Yeah, no, he did have slaves.
I'm wrong.
So
we're not experts.
Like, these are people that would say, like, there are people that would say they're against slavery, but they have slaves. And I believe George Washington was one of them.
He was not against slavery, but he did believe in the practice of freeing your slaves at the end of your life, which, by the way, his wife did not do.
Dentures. He actually took teeth from his slaves and used them for his teeth. So when I would not ever, in my mind, be like, yo, that's a great man.
A great man to me.
I have trouble when you say, like,
you're right.
Columbus was a great man.
I should clarify.
I don't think he was a great man.
A great man, somebody who does something great. To me, the definition of great is somebody who does something memorable that has impacted and changed the world. That's what great means to me. George Washington did things that impacted and changed the entire world as we know it.
Yeah, but you could do that and also be evil. Like,
that's
for
my
example,
point. History is
what's
made.
His name? Yeah, Nazi dude.
Hitler.
Hitler
was a great man. He was also a terrible person.
I wouldn't say he was a great man.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's a definition thing. My point
maybe
is,
it's a positive. Like, he was a great man in terms of being negative.
I don't see great as a positive or negative.
But I would never look at Hitler as a great positive dude, because he wasn't that.
No, he's not a positive.
Very disrespectful to Jewish people and killed tons of Jewish people. Not to mention he was half Jewish himself.
I don't know if it was half, but he was Jewish half. In terms of heritage.
So I would never look at him as a great person.
So I guess it's a definition thing. I don't view great like the term great.
So we're talking about how you view the word great.
Then. Yeah. I guess I should have clarified.
So this is what Jabin thinks in terms of the word great. This is what he thinks.
Great means to me something that inspires awe, not something positive or negative. Great is a neutral term to me.
Okay.
Something inspiring even, but not good or bad. Good.
We hear him. We're listening to him.
Yeah. So work with me here. Mm-hmm. George Washington was a great man in that he impacted the world irreversibly. Hitler was a great man in that he impacted the world irreversibly. He was not a good man. He was a terrible man. I would even argue he was an evil man. George Washington.
He was an evil man.
Yeah. George Washington was a bad person. He did bad things. And I don't respect him in terms of personhood, but I do respect the actions he made to make America the way it is. I don't respect his conduct when it comes to people and his perspective on people. I respect his conduct in terms of what sacrifices he made to make America the way it is. Do you understand that difference?
I hear you. I don't really fuck with George Washington, but I hear you.
Okay, fair enough. And if you disagree with me, I encourage you to like contradict. I'm not an expert. I am not the guy.
We're just giving our opinions on things.
I'm not a professional historian.
Okay, so we're doing this video on White History Month,
right?
And it's basically to highlight what they've done wrong.
To highlight what they've done, and I think
from my perspective,
white people have done terrible things on average. I really think if you're going to do White History Month, let's do it right. Let's do it the way it should be.
Right.
Let's talk about what they've actually done, and most of it's terrible. And I'm sorry.
Right. So, because listen, like if you've been watching this far, you would know that you would know that White History Month is every day of the month, every day. Like we know about what white people did 365 days out of the year, every year.
True.
So if there is to be a White History Month, it would be about what they've done wrong, because they've done a lot wrong when you're looking at it from a history lens.
Yeah.
So yeah, like when we say White History Month, that's what I'm talking about, at least.
I would even argue we agree. The reason I'm saying I want to talk about the things that white people have done right,
we talk about that every day of the year. That's right. How I'm looking at it. I'm like, we literally talk about that all the time.
But I disagree. Because I'm not saying that white people aren't talked about enough and it's like, oh, white people are underrepresented. I'm saying that we're actually lying to people. Like, I don't actually think we're talking about real white history when we talk about white people's accomplishments. I think
Then what are they doing when they're talking about white people?
We're talking about a fantasy. For example, the Wild West. The Wild West wasn't a thing. That's not real history. Cowboys weren't what you think they are.
They weren't. I don't know much about cowboys. I got to be honest.
Fair enough.
He probably knows more than me when it comes to like I like Western movies, but I'm not gonna act like when we're talking about Western stuff. I know what I'm talking about. He probably knows more. To be honest.
The point is, it was settled by prostitutes. Like,
oh, you did tell me about this. Yeah, I have to look into it more myself. So yeah,
for sure. My point is, white history is consistently misrepresented. Columbus was a dipshit. He was a fucking idiot, and he didn't really do anything of significance.
Okay, so at this point, a lot of us know that by now, but I feel like what you're saying is they're not teaching that.
They're not teaching that.
Right.
That's what I'm fucking saying. Like, white history is taught wrong. White History Month is about teaching white history accurately, and it's mostly terrible. And if we want to talk about white accomplishments, things that white people have done that are good, we have to talk about individual accomplishments in spite of the fact that white people, on average, are systemically racist.
I got you. So
I'm ranting.
Okay.
I'm ranting.
No. I hear what you're saying. So you're saying white history is literally mostly bad, and if you want to talk about the accomplishments of what a white person did, it should be about the individual and not as a whole.
Yes, because it's in spite of that. It's literally in defiance of the system. And even if it is in accordance with the racist practices of white people as a race on average, that means that actual accomplishment is less significant than you've been taught it is. White privilege. If somebody's more privileged than another person, their accomplishments in terms of proportion are less impressive, less significant. Yes. Sorry, right. I'm emotional about this.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, this all makes a lot of sense.
The reason I think July should be White History Month is because we talk about a lot of white accomplishments on July, and I don't even think they're insignificant, but I think they lack
Excuse
context.
the motorcycle.
You're good. That guy's just feeling his life.
Right.
And he's enjoying it. White history is talked about in July, and we're not talking about it all. We're not giving it its full context. July is a perfect month for white history, and that's why I think white history should exist. Because we need to talk about it all. We need to talk about the whole thing.
Okay, the beautiful thing I love about this podcast is whenever I bring this up, I'm like, yeah, okay, America isn't going to talk about this, like in schools, in college, in high school, and whatnot. But that's why you got people like us that are going to be like, yo, we're going to give it to you raw, we're going to give it to you unfiltered, we're going to give it to you the way we think it should be. And when you start talking about a White History Month in July, highlighting what white people as a whole have done wrong, but specifically talking about the individual, like, that's dope as hell.
Yeah,
like,
I agree. It's real. It's like honest. And I want
it's honest.
We can't progress. I don't mean to interrupt, but just
I even think, I think there's even people who would disagree with a White History Month at all, because they would honestly say, they'd be like, okay, I hear what you're saying, Bryson. People with some sense. Or Bryson and Jabin, I hear what you're saying. But at the same time, I already know, like, this is the internet. This is the real world. They would be like, but there's already White History Month every single day of the year.
Yeah.
They'll be like, why do we need to hear about the accomplishments of white individuals on this particular month when we hear about it every single other day?
Yeah, I really do have to disagree because...
And I get that.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that.
Yeah. I honestly, my honest opinion is you don't actually know all the accomplishments white people have done, because it's way worse than you actually realize. It's like 100 times worse. You haven't actually done the research. White people have done really terrible shit. Like, it's way worse than you realize.
Honestly, now that I think about it even more so, I'm like, why would we even... Okay, so listen to this.
Yeah,
so we know that we highlight everything a white person does outside of this so-called White History Month, right? July.
For sure.
So let's say this White History Month is real, right? In July, we talk about the negative things they've done as a whole, and we highlight on the individuals that they've done that are good.
In spite of the systemic oppression.
Right. So let's say that this is a real thing. Where was I going with this? Fuck, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm losing. I was gonna go somewhere with this.
This is a rant episode.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? I forget it. I was going somewhere.
White history. Even if we highlight the individual practices that white people have done, that doesn't mean that white people on whole.
Yeah, I know, because I know people would still be angry at the fact that, like, they would say, why would we highlight the positive things when we already get those things?
That's fair.
Every other day of the year. It's like,
but it's to put it into context. It's like all the positive things that rich people do. Oh, wow, that's really cool that this rich person did this thing. It's like, put it into context. They actually get tax breaks from the charitable things they do.
It's different.
It's a little, no, I completely agree. But my
we
point,
can't compare that because it's so different. Because
I guess what I mean is, why were they able to do those positive things? We're not actually taught that. We're not taught why this individual was able to do this despite their circumstances. Sir Isaac Newton was a white man, and he did amazing things for science, but we don't actually know his sociological context.
I already know people will go crazy if there's a White History Month. I'll be like...
I'm excited for it.
Even I would be like, White History Month, why? And then if it's I think, if it was a White History Month specifically talking about the negative things they did, I'd be like, okay, this is interesting because this is true. They're finally looking at themselves in the mirror. I'd be like, dope, you should commit to that. But when you start implementing the positive things they did in that month, I'd be like, why are they doing this? We get that every other day out of the year.
Yeah, but I do disagree with that. We don't actually see why those things are positive. Like Thomas Edison, he was a asshole. He was a piece of shit. But he's a white guy that we celebrate in history. My issue is that's not real white history. The accomplishments he did isn't real. It's a fantasy.
Wait,
we've made it up.
What's real white history to you then?
Real white history is something that a white person actually literally did in the context of the systemic oppression that white people implemented themselves. White people throughout history have done terrible things. And the white people who have done good are literally exceptions.
Who are these white people that have
That's what I want to discuss. We're out
actual
of time. Literally
good.
out of time.
Damn, we are out of time.
But there are
we might have to do a part 2 to this. But I think if you've been listening this far, you kind of know where we're going with this conversation. And we will do another part to this.
We fucking will, and it's going to be so good. I see where you're coming from. White history is going to highlight real history. And real history isn't as pretty as you've been taught.
So tell us what you think. Like and subscribe. If you enjoy the content, come by again, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.